Well, good afternoon to all of you. Good morning to some of you. I know those in the West Coast, the East Coast, different time zones. Um, we are going to go ahead and proceed with this meeting right now. Today's meeting is going to be talking about the strategic planning. Before we begin, I do want to explain briefly about what all of this is going to look like moving forward. Right now, we are focusing on different aspects for the strategic planning. We have 5 different topics that we are delving into, getting feedback and information from. And that is what we will be doing today. Once this part is over, we will take all of that information and dialogue over to CEASD, and the board will then meet, which will happen on Wednesday, all day Wednesday. Thursday and Friday will be, Friday obviously a half day, but Thursday and Friday we'll be getting other people involved, making sure we're getting that consultation, that advice to finalize our strategic plan and make sure that it is efficient. Once that is done, we will publish it and distribute it to all CEASD board members, making sure they have an opportunity to overview that. Friday, Saturday, Sunday during the conference, we'll distribute to members as well. Sunday afternoon during our general meeting, we will be asking all of you to vote in favor of the strategic plan, and we will start the process from there to get the ball rolling. Any questions about this thus far? Anyone can pop up on screen or in the chat. Are there any questions? Okay. Well, then let's begin with today's strategic planning meeting. We'll start with EI and outreach, early intervention. Outreach are together. Then we have language deprivation. We have least restrictive environment, our LRE. We have diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. And then we have our group talking about staff shortages and the challenges that come with that. So those are our 5 breakout groups. There is not one that is prioritized higher than the other. They are all of equal importance to us. So what we are going to do at this time is we can bring up on screen all at the same time. We are going to review what has been discussed, all of the information we have. We want to gather your thoughts, your feedbacks, your additions, and then let's call up EI Outreach Committee. We'll then document all of these, take notes of your opinions, your perspectives, and then update their document. So we're going to be doing that for each of the subcommittees, looking at their topics. So let us begin. If there are no questions at this time, none being asked, it looks like. So let me go ahead and begin sharing the screen. Can everyone see the document clearly? I will give you some time to take a gander at this. We'll scroll up through the document. Feel free to come up on video or in chat, share your thoughts and perspectives. Now, right now we're focusing on the goals and the objectives. So I want you to peruse that aspect of things right now. Okay, I'm going to open up the floor. Please share your views, ideas, thoughts. Claire, you just popped up on video. Did you have a comment or a thought? Yeah, I'm just trying to share. Okay, so I just wanted to remind everyone that we do have 3 goals as of right now. And the reason we have that is because we command 2 different strategic areas, basically. The first one is early intervention, and then the second one is regarding outreach. So because of that, we know that there's a lot here. I know you're looking at a lot. But we hope that this captures really the gist of everything that we were that we have and wanted to discuss, because we've had many meetings, but we are definitely open to feedback. Please, we would love it. We'd love to hear from each one of you. Yes, the strategic plan really does apply to all of us. It applies to all of this. All of your schools will benefit from this process. So any other comments or thoughts? Okay, it seems like amazing job done, that it's already ideal. Again, if this is not providing you enough time to peruse this and then provide that feedback, this should have already been sent to you. Please take time to think it over and then share feedback from now until before CEASD's convention. Preferably Wednesday of that week of the conference, because Friday, Saturday, Sunday is the main conference. So you want to make sure that we have enough time to really work on it Thursday and then part of Friday to ensure that we have some benchmarks that we can establish and measurable objectives that we can measure our progress with. Claire, thank you so much for clarifying why there were 3 goals. The floor is open. Please feel free to comment at any time on EI outreach.
Sure.
Okay, let's go on to language deprivation. And for the interpreters, let's go ahead and have the language deprivation interpreter come up and voice for any questions, comments, or.
Yep.
All right, sorry, I apologize for the technical difficulties. All right, I believe that's Shayla, Shauna, Shayla, Charla. Okay, you know what? Let me stop sharing screen. Let me figure out what's going on. Hey, David.
Hello.
Ah, there we go. All right, I got it. So again, same procedure as the first one. I'm just going to give you a moment to peruse it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this. And then is there any discussion?
So that one was not the most recent version, David. I actually have a more updated version, and that's where we had tidied up some things.
Great. Why don't you go ahead and share your screen and let's do that. Thank
Okay.
you, Stacy. Perfect. Thank you. Claire, you had a comment?
Yeah, I did. So we know that our strategic goals on early intervention, we were collabing with the language aspect, that language deprivation. That said, I mean, this is fine because when we do meet, when we are together, we will continue to do this review and see where they tie in with one another and see where the overlap is. So we'll take a look at that when we're together and create a position paper. So both of us have that as an objective. And that's fine.
Mhm.
That's fine because we're working together on that.
Right. And I think it shows the strength of the members at large and their feelings about this topic as well. There's a sense of urgency about this. I'd also like to add that in section 4 here, our group did go back and forth in our discussion because we recognize and realize that some of this really is outside the scope of CEASD itself, and it really comes down to the individual schools. We did not want to take this out because we wanted people to recognize this and see it. So I think some of that will become what we discuss when the consultant comes to meet with us and help our board finalize the draft plan.
Any other suggestions? If you look at this, any thoughts that you want to put on the table here? Remaining quiet. All right. Thank you, Stacy, for sharing your screen with the updated version of that. I do want to mention a little bit more just because we had Stacy and Claire both mention that there is some overlap in certain topics, and that is certainly true. You know, this is the overall arch or the umbrella. Diversity really does apply to each of these. And so looking at each strategic plan and how that pillar, that topic can support diversity there is going to be overlap. You know, in terms of the placement and everything, the need right now is the urgent need. So thank you so much, both of you. Now let's bring up least restrictive environment, LRE. Okay, hopefully this is the right document. Let me double check. LRE people, is this the right one? I was incorrect with the language deprivation. There was an updated version, so thank you so much, Stacy, for bringing that up. LRE, is this the correct one? Are there any comments, thoughts, suggestions for this goal related to least restrictive environment? You know, sometimes the LEA interpretation, the federal level, the state level, the school's perspective, the interpretations are quite different at times. So any thoughts on this? I do want to share a brief story. Oh, but we have Claire popping up. So Claire, you first.
Sorry, I think we did have a position paper on the LRE. So I think that probably should be updated, I believe.
Great, thank you. So my story that I wanted to share with you all, it's quite interesting. The state sent out an SPP looking at the number of students that were outside of the classroom in deaf schools and so forth. I went to the federal level Department of Education and was there with the Secretary of Education. At that time, it was a person from Kentucky, a former LEA from Kentucky. Sat with this person and explained the LEA perspective, and they said, no, that is not the interpretation of it. The federal interpretation is. But when I explained what our vision was, she said, yes, that's what we are looking at. But it seems that the LEA did not have the same perspective. And so she was saying, no, this is obviously from LEA and what they've reported, our expectation of LRE is not happening. From my explanation, she finally realized it was happening at a school level. And so from Connecticut, we had a golden opportunity to really help C. Cardano from Connecticut. It was really helpful to just explain and clarify from the different perspectives of LRE. So that story, that experience really hit home for me. Any other comments?
Okay, I also just wanted to share a little bit more on, I'm looking here at the numbers. So numbers 4 and 6, those two are actually very connected. Here at Riverside, we have the legislative task force working on this. But just last week,
Congressman Takano was on campus and he is sponsoring the Cogswell-Macy Act. And we just had an impromptu side conversation here. The main concern is the other states at this point. Legislators need to be made aware of this because the point here is he can't do it alone. It does require other states' engagement here and they have to be actively involved. That said, I acknowledge this, and what this means for us is what I did was I offered to make a video so that we could get that out there to just explain the importance of our schools, our residential schools, and what kind of services and resources we can share to the outside stakeholders so that they realize the value of our schools and the purpose and intent behind what we do. And he was on board, but then I realized at the same time, they simply don't have the resources, but we do. We have the resources and we're just kind of stuck. We can't work with them, but if they come to us, we can use that leverage. We can capitalize on that opportunity. So I think it's really important that we reach out to our local legislators, get their engagement, not necessarily at the state level, but more so federal level, just because at the federal level, they can make that trickle down effect occur with the states. So just wanted to share that aspect.
Barbara?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to that as well. There is the Cogswell-Macy relationship. We have been meeting every month. We have a group, and we have been trying to set up a number of different working groups with members and meetings with Congress. So that is how we get more co-sponsors, by doing that work, doing those face-to-face times. Of course, now they're all happening remotely, but spending that time, keeping that on their radar. There's just not enough of us. And last week we
You're right.
did have our Capitol Hill Advocacy Day. For those of you who were involved, it was great. Thank you so much. I know that you had some meetings with legislators, and so keep that work going. We always have work to do. It is endless, but that's where we're at.
You know, I just thought of something again with Congressman Takano. He also mentioned this desperate desire for the state schools to be sent to the legislative summit that they have in February every year. So this is done annually, and often Congress would like to see students. And I didn't realize that, which tells us that this is something that they're not minimizing. It means a lot to them. And I'm committed to that for next year, no doubt about it. But the other states should be doing the same. And I'm thinking maybe we even make this as a part of our long-term goals, that we have that long-term impact.
Yeah, many of our schools did come with students. We did bring students with us. So yes, yeah, we know that that has an impact. And there's some training happening ahead of time, and that's working a partnership with NAD to do that.
Thank you.
Very critical. Agreed.
I agree with this. Thank you so much, ladies. Any other comments about LRE? All right, I believe we are ready to move on to DEI. Let's pull up diversity.
All right.
Okay, John, take it away.
Perfect. Do you mind scrolling down a bit? Yeah, go on. Keep going. These are just old meeting notes. Yeah, if you don't mind going towards the bottom. Yep. Is this excellent? Okay. Thank you, David. Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Having a good Thursday. We're having nice weather outside here. Feel like it's finally springtime quickly approaching. Anyways, there are two main goals, or two main priorities, I should say, with DEI. And before I proceed, I just do want to mention that we came to an agreement that DEI diversity, yes, is a standalone strategy area. DEI, however, should be an overarching goal for all of these areas, meaning when we discuss LRE, think about it through a DEI lens. When we think about language deprivation, think about it through a DEI lens. Teacher and staffing shortage, again, a DEI lens. So consider that lens in all of the priorities, but there are some specific approaches that we will be focusing on within this. The first one being a mechanism to allow schools and programs to share resources in regards to DEI, whether that be training, curriculum, parent collaboration, family collaboration. We don't want our schools to be siloed. We would like to see a centralized clearinghouse of sorts to be able to support one another. And so setting up a mechanism, almost like a national clearinghouse, having something centralized and creating a mechanism for that to happen. That's the first one. The second one has to do with the Leadership Academy. In general, that's for those who are aspiring leaders, those who are looking towards superintendency, but we'd like to see a focus on BIPOC teachers, perhaps those who are future administrators, but creating a safe space for those individuals to participate. And that would be providing resources through various professional developments, webinars, even hosting an in-person face-to-face. So again, having that Leadership Academy, but also having almost a sub-academy. And that aligns with increasing the number of CDOs, Chief Diversity Officers. There are some deaf schools and programs in which already have those, and they are beginning to have some collaborative meetings, regular get-togethers, and we agree that we need to have some sort of standard mission amongst the group, and then also be able to develop partnerships with CEASD through those CDOs to support our schools. So we discussed possibly setting up a CDO or even considering a best practices document. And so capitalizing on those individuals already out there doing some of the work. If you could scroll down a little bit further. Okay. Also, we know with CDOs, in building that capacity, having some consultant services, whether it be in regards to accreditation, or even we discussed viability studies. We had discussion about doing some sort of equity study. Schools may recognize the need, but then having an outside consultation being a service that we can offer to help build that. So that could be a partnership with our CDOs as that gets more developed and robust in its functions. That could be a support for what we are doing. So those are the two main priorities in which we're focusing on, providing support and mentorship for our BIPOC teachers. And that also impacts other, including the teaching and staff shortages. So that kind of sums up our two main goals, as well as some of the objectives within that priority.
Great. Thank you, John.
Oh, it looks like Claire made a comment. Hold on. Right, absolutely, Claire. I think it's important to share that because this is very challenging work in DEI. And so I think setting up a mechanism, having something in place, because we're unable to do this alone. We can't do this in a silo approach. So for example, I know that there are two schools who are considering purchasing a curriculum related to social justice, or sorry, actually restorative practices is what the focus is, and changing our approach within schools. And both schools are looking at making these purchases and comparing, looking for a curriculum or program, but recognizing it doesn't necessarily suit the needs of our deaf students. So they've talked to the company about possibly having the addition of ASL videos or making it deaf friendly. We don't want to see two schools both facing that when they're already maybe have 3 or 4 schools who can work together and helping develop professional development for our teachers, for programming and curriculum. That's just one good example of a possibility. Okay.
All right. Great. Thank you.
Any
Yeah.
comments out there? Questions, comments, anyone? Very open for discussion. We've had a really good discussion amongst our group throughout the course of this process. Hi,
Hey,
Amy.
I'm excited for the spring weather too. Just FYI, throwing that out there. It looks like it was a really good discussion. And I know that you've already mentioned, that you commented about, being a part of those other groups, overlapping with that. Was there consideration on how to support smaller schools? For example, with DEI or even the CDO, those different roles that tends to come into play more with bigger schools that may have the budgetary space for all of that. But with smaller schools, we don't necessarily have that. We're a little more limited. So how would you be sharing these plans, these resources, these positions to those smaller schools and providing that perspective as well?
I think that's perfect. I'm glad that you mentioned that. And looking at that first goal, having that mechanism in place for sharing resources, I think that's going to be an important factor to take into play because as we know, our schools and programs vary across the board. We also have to consider the political climate. We cannot move forward without having some considerations about that, where other schools may have more flexibility versus others. We have to consider the board or the community. Are they ready to dive on into some of this? And so having that in place. Thank you, Amy. That's a great point.
Thank you. Thank you. Great.
All right, great. I saw some good comments. I saw some from Rory and then also Charla. So, hey, Rory and Charla. All right, great. Okay, thank you for your comments in the discussion. All right, bye, everybody.
Okay, great. So one tip for all of you here, when you see the document, typically, which is going to be on the left side of your screen, The presenters will be on the right. And if we have many popping up on screen and they're too small for you to really see, you have the capability of clicking on the white little line in between the document and the screens of videos. There's a white little line. You can click on that and adjust the size of either side of the screen. So please feel free to do that to make visibility easier. Now, last but definitely not least, we're going to bring up the staff shortages, which is definitely a hot topic right now. I'm going to let Michelle show you her document. I'm going to let Michelle kind of lead this discussion. Let me find the document and see if I can't pull it up.
May I share my screen so that I have a better visual to show everyone, okay?
Ah, there we go. Perfect. Great. Thanks, Michelle.
Okay. Now, our group started a little later on. The discussions happened, but then we divided out into yet another group. So we have some broad goals, excuse the interpreter, for placing high quality teachers in our programs. But we really broke that down into two things. Retention, we again realized we have to keep the teachers we have, and then recruitment. So those are the two main components which you see on this document. The original discussion came out with some objectives, and they are, if you can see right at the end here, just give me 1 second, please. Hopefully you can see that better. Very good. So retention, you see the goals here and objectives. And then recruitment. And we began the discussion on these objectives. However, we didn't have a chance to finish those up. So these few last ones you see, we need to analyze and discuss a little further. But this is what we have to this point. Remember, we started a little later on than other groups. So I'll give you just a moment to read that.
Michelle, there's a Grammarly was updated box. Do you mind clicking the X of that? It is blocking some of the text. Awesome. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
No, we don't want to miss the information.
Now, related to both goals, we discussed what CEASD can do, the capacity that CEASD has. Now, most of us are responsible for our deaf schools, but what is it that CEASD really can do? And that was the main focus of these goals. Of course, those highlighted in yellow are still under construction, so to speak. Any questions regarding this? Our group has been very good, very interesting, and several of them joined a little later on after we'd already been started.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Anyone else have a comment, thoughts, questions? Floor is open. Yes, Claire.
I really like the idea of, federal level support, especially in the form of grants for teacher prep. Now, Barbara and I have talked about this very topic for a long time. It's just a reality that there's not a lot of money, and let's just use the interpreter. There is a lot of money, rather, in personnel prep, but not so much for deaf teachers, teachers of the deaf. So we really need to work on that. I'm so glad to see that as part of your goals.
You know, I think one thing in terms of just the personnel prep, you know, we're looking at, there are 11 grants right now under the field of just deafness. 9 out of 11 are related to oral language. 2 of them related to sign, but that's more total communication, SIMCOM. So like you said, there's really just one, and we have to really depend on those universities applying for that, being assertive. And so we have to encourage them to apply for those. And again, it's all, you know, deafness, it's typically known as the low incidence. You know, we have a lot of schools closing because they have 10 students, 7, 12 students compared to, you know, professors with 7. How do we really build that money back? You know, there's, the only way to help is with those grants, but we realize that if we keep filling them out and keep sending them in, then that will also grow some of the funding opportunities. You know, while there's a lot for oral language, but there are less oral schools out there that are applying for those, whereas we have multiple schools with less of a pot for just ASL and deaf schools. So I think we need to be checking, you know, they're able to check on their students 2-3 times a week. It's not necessarily educational, it's more of consulting, but that's what's going on in that other field. And so they have a different purpose and a different personnel plan and prep plan, whereas we are here focused on deaf education, you know, on a full-time basis. So any other thoughts, comments, anything else?
This is Michelle. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Michelle. All right. So we are not done with this. You know, we are still going to be going back. We are still collecting the information, the thoughts, sharing, asking for feedback. So we will be doing all of this until the April conference on that Wednesday. We do have a consultant working with us to help finalize the strategic plan, and then we will send it out. And this again applies to all of you because we all want our deaf students to thrive. Is there anything else to wrap up before we close for today's meeting? Barbara? So you mentioned that consultant, you know, we sent out a survey from the consultant so that people please go ahead and look into that survey, reply to that survey, because that is data that we're collecting for that SPP. Thank you so much for reminding us of that, Barbara. The survey is part of that data collection so that we can compare it with what we are developing to make sure that we are mentioning what is being needed or what is out there from you all. So if we're not mentioning that within the strategic plan, we have the information empirically in front of us that we can then input into our strategic plan. Anything else? The floor is still open. Any other last minute thoughts? All right. Well, why not everyone come up on video, say hi and bye to everybody, and then we will wrap up this meeting.